everybody. So very good to see you. I'm so excited about this presentation. I've never given a presentation on elderhood before, and it's because I think I resisted for so long acting my age. I'll never forget being at a spiritual direction meeting with a Jesuit priest in not far from Lafayette, Louisiana. And I was in my late 40s, early 50s. And he said, and I was talking about impediment to what I thought was my spiritual life at that point. And he said, well, you know, as a middle-aged man, it's bound to be different for you now. Middle-aged? Who in the hell are you to talk? I'm middle-aged. So I later, in one of my peer supervision circles, was talking about that, and the leader, who's a psychotherapist, said, you know, Ed, elderhood is a good thing. And so I began to embrace my elderhood. I was in my 60s then. And so ever since then, I have come to understand that this is something to learn from. And my God, have I been learning from it since I accepted this job at St. Luke's. Because those of you who don't know me, I was retired and having a great time just kind of calling my own shots. And then here comes Richard Lee to say, you know, Ed, in his chipper way, okay, we're going to take this down. And I'm learning, thank you, sir. And I'm learning about all these things. Okay.
I'm off. Yes.
You know? Why don't you I'll use that instead. Oh, no, here comes, okay. And he is going to this event is being taped and also streamed, and Brandon is one of our professionals who takes care of. Thanks, Brandon. That's good, I think. Yeah, I'll keep talking. Don't you think it's good? So anyway, but as I pay attention to him, and I think we're good, yeah. I want to say that one of the things that I'm simply going to announce now about elderhood, and it'll be referred to in my slides later on, is how full of surprises it is when you live a called life, which is going to be one of the kind of the central messages today about how important it is for all of us who are aging, or I like the word saging. Got that? Yep. Learning and becoming wiser. Need to be open to surprises. And one of the great surprises of my life at St. Luke's, of which there are a million, is the presence of a dear, dear friend. I count him as a soul friend. And his name is Richard Hines, and he's here on the front row. Now, the reason he's so significant is that my life really took a turn when I went to law school, and I had this relationship with the sound of the genuine, and we're going to talk about that in just a second. And I took a bathroom break in the middle of a 4-hour UCC, Universal Commercial Code exam at Vanderbilt. And I walked outside and had this conversation with God, and I kept on going. I did not go back into the room. Richard did, got a law degree, has had a wonderful and fruitful law career. And my coming back here has been a time for our having a reunion, because I hadn't seen him in so many years. But he stayed with the UCC and I left it. Now, I had this lovely coffee with the planning group for Act 3 about what I was going to say. And it was going in a certain direction, and it's still going to go in that direction. But as I prepared these remarks, it became very, very clear to me that the final point that I'm going to make today couldn't be made without talking about the word vocation. So I just simply want to say that the frame of reference for everything I'm going to say is vocation. And then I went to my computer file that I'd been developing over all these years about vocation and found that it was one of the richest and inspiring, not because it was any stuff of mine, it's because I'd copied all these other smart, wise people about what they considered to be vocation. And I realized that vocation has been a central, pulsing, vital, alive issue and value for me all my life. And I want to lift it up here to you, because whether or not anybody in this room uses the word vocation, every one of you is a called person. So I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about this whole business, and then I'm going to say in 5 minutes what I came to say. And I'm going to try to do all this quickly so that there's time for some conversation, because I am a learner. And by the way, so let me just say this. I hadn't planned to say this. I hope to say a whole bunch of stuff I hadn't planned to say.
I told you.
Yeah. And by the way, sermonettes make Christianettes. So I'm committed to talking a long time, because I want y'all to be mature Christians. Don't want you to be Christianettes. Anyway, as Horace has to say in Stephens, okay, Ed. Anyway, so let's get back to the point. You can look at your life as a hero. You can look at your life as a victim, and those are two very different stories. The way I propose that we all look at our lives is as learner, because that's a very different narrative. Not hero or victim, but as learner. But now back to the point about vocation. So that's the perspective. Each of us has an irreplaceable vocation to be Christ, according to Merton. All of us are called to be Christ. And if we do not fulfill that vocation, something will be forever missing from the kingdom of God. That's the most important thing I can say today. Your unique wiring and calling is so important for you to embody and flesh out. And if you and I don't do that in our unique and wild and weird way, the world's going to be missing something. The kingdom of God is going to be missing something. That's what's at stake this afternoon, is for you and me to claim how weird, unique, and wild and beautiful our vocation to be Christ is. Now, by the way, if anybody wants a copy of this PowerPoint, email me, I'll send it to you. You're not going to be able to read all this. Some of this is for me to read to you, and I won't read absolutely every word that's up here. But it is important for us to say, before we get to our wild, unique, weird vocations, is to say all of us do have a basic common vocation, and that's to be a human being. Particularly, Dan Berrigan says, if we're talking about Christians, as Christians, the basic thing is the very difficult vocation of living human in an increasingly inhuman world. So that is our common vocation, but I want to keep on going. Now, I want to introduce this notion of living an uncalled life versus a called life. And this is going to come from this guy, Walter Brueggemann, who taught at Columbia forever, and he's emeritus, and he lives in Cincinnati now. And I'm not going to read every word up here, but he says that the story of Moses and the burning bush really helps us understand that we are all called, and we need to understand that. And an uncalled life is an autonomous existence in which there's no intrusion, disruption, or redefinition, no appearance or utterance of the holy. And coming down here, Moses understands immediately and intuitively that this summons that came out of the burning bush from the God of promise and liberation was a threat to his very life, and certainly the way he had planned his life. In our time, the notion of call has often been trivialized, institutionalized, and rendered innocuous as bland calls to, quote unquote, to obedience and to ministry. Oh, God doesn't call me because I'm not a priest. God only calls the ministers. Bull. God calls us all, and if we don't get in touch with that, we will be people who are living an uncalled life. So a right sense of call and its danger, and let me go back up here, its intrusion, its disruption, or its redefinition, if that is going on, that derives from a right sense of God's intention. So please, let me urge you to think of yourself today as being a called person and not having an uncalled life. So our time is going, but he goes from Moses to Jeremiah, and he talks about how countercultural being a called person is, because the culture calls us to do one's own thing, self-actualize, self-assert, and self-fulfill. That's the ideology of our time, is to propose that one can live an uncalled life, one not referred to any purpose beyond oneself. But the whole thing is for us to give ourselves over to something that's bigger than ourselves. Now, I love this notion that has turned out to be a real definition of my life. I'm not in charge of my life. I don't shape my life. My life is defined and shaped by someone other than myself. So, I love the last line in the first paragraph. So, living this called existence is not an event. It didn't happen just once. It's an ongoing dynamic of a growing and powerful claim. One's embrace of a sense of call may mature in time and grow beyond the innocence of the outset. So that's Jeremiah's life. I need to go on to talk about, this is Rowan Williams, who was the Archbishop of Canterbury 2 archbishops of Canterbury ago, or maybe just one. And Harry Pritchett wrote this wonderful little ditty we used to sing in folk masses when I was in charge of folk masses here. And it's been sung all over the world. Surprise, surprise, God is a surprise right before your eyes. It's baffling to the wise. Surprise, surprise, God is a surprise. Open up your eyes and see. The interruptions in our lives are the work. The call of God comes in what isn't planned. Hope and I took a medicinal drive to Costco yesterday, on Monday. And I just turned to her and I said, honey, we're driving in Atlanta at age 71, 2019. Even a year ago, we couldn't have planned this. I was trying to find some photographs in my iPhone yesterday, and I was finding some photographs of our being in the Hudson River Valley doing a week-long retreat at the Holy Cross Monastery, and then being in Princeton to do the funeral for the father of a really close friend, and then going into New York. And it was during that weekend that Richard Lee called me. And it just brought back the fact that there was no way I could have planned to return to the place where I was trained and ordained 35 years ago. I mean, for those who don't know, I was ordained here this coming Sunday, 35 years ago, 1983. And I was here for 3 years on the staff of Dan Matthews Sr., as the children's minister and the youth minister. And I I've been saying it was a place where I was ordained. I've been getting in touch with the fact this is a place where I was trained also. Because there are many people in this room I knew who knew me, and I count you as part of my trainers. So, now this is from the AA material. Bill W., who helped found the AA, he liked to quote Bernard Shaw, who said, "This is the true joy in life, being used for a purpose, recognized by yourself as a mighty one." And then he goes on, "The being thoroughly worn out before you are thrown on the scrap heap." Not very sweet. The being a force of nature instead of a feverish, selfish little clod of ailments and grievances. Complaining that the world will not devote itself to making you happy. Eric Erickson, pardon?
Be a lot funnier if it wasn't true.
I know, really. But all of us know stagnant people who are so whiny and negative because the world and the universe and life has not made them happy. And Brueggemann would say that they are uncalled people. They don't understand that their lives are supposed to be given over to a mighty purpose. I want to, now you can't read this, and I didn't expect you to. There's a woman in my life in Pasadena named Kathy Clement, and she's in the chapter, I wrote a book, and she's in a chapter on community because she got a brain cancer. And she called me immediately when she got home from the doctor, and she says, "I am telling on this damn cancer." She says, "It's a bully," and I'm telling on it, because that's what you ought to do to bullies. So she sent out an email that night to 100 of her closest friends, telling them she had brain cancer. Well, cancer and health are nuanced, right? So I'm not going to say a one-to-one relationship. But she's walking around and she's really wonderful. She's a very wise person. She's a sage, to be sure. And we were having a conversation about the departure of somebody on staff in Pasadena. And she comes from an evangelical background. And she was saying that part of the fervor of evangelicals, now this is not something I'm going to be promoting, but I'm going to be promoting the spirit of this. She's part of the fervor is that they really believe that every moment that they have with you could be the gateway to your eternal destiny or your eternal address. Now, I don't believe in heaven and hell the way that does. But we shouldn't lose those of you who don't believe in heaven and hell the way I don't believe in heaven and hell, we shouldn't lose our fervor about every transaction and every interaction could be the gateway for somebody becoming their true and thrilling self, which is what heaven is. And being a little self-oriented clod is what hell is, right? So I'm just throwing up all these things just to tell you how passionate I am about this vocation and issue of vocation and how I'm using it as the lens through which I'm looking at my elderhood and what's going on with me. So, this is another favorite thinker of mine, but he says, to be a person is to have a vocation. Now, so interesting, I love to watch PBS NewsHour every night. And there were two playwrights the other night, maybe 2 nights ago, who had written this play about refugees and the problems that we have with refugees throughout the world. And they were saying that they had discovered in doing this that clearly there's this Maslow's hierarchy of needs that all of us have. We have to have water, and we have to have food, and we have to have relationships. Then they said, but to be a person, you have to be connected to the arts, to music, to good writing, to drama, to painting, to sculpture, to whatever. And Inchausti is saying, and to be a person, you have to feel that you're called, that you have some kind of vocational meaning every day. So, this is from Eugene Peterson, who translated the Bible into the Message, which is a very good thing to consult from time to time. It's not literal, but it's really great. And I'm not going to read all of this, but he says, the greatest thing any person can do for another person is to confirm the deepest thing in that person, to take the time and have the discernment to see what's most deeply there, most fully that person, and then confirm it by recognizing and encouraging it. And so we, in the Thursday night Roar groups meetings on Thursday during May, we've been doing these exercises that Roar has us do, where we're in pairs and one person tells a story about what has happened to them during the course of just the 60 minutes so far in the evening. And the other person's call is to listen, or to use Peterson's language, to confirm the deepest thing that was going on, and you get in touch with that by paying attention to your own body as an instrument and pay attention to what's resonating in you when somebody else talks. So, see, I'm changing as I'm here at St. Luke's. I have begun a practice of trying to, when I'm aware, sometimes I'm distracted, preoccupied, but when I'm aware, to pay attention to where I'm having goosebumps or where my heart's beating fast. It's energy, as I see Mary here nodding. And to say that to somebody, even to a stranger in the elevator, particularly to the beleaguered checkout person at the grocery store. And it can change a person's day. The person who's just sitting there as you leave the secured area at the airport. How's it going today? What was the best thing that happened to you today? And that is a way of really reaching in to a person. And then I love this. If you want me to send this to you, I will. But he talks about Jonathan and King David. And he said, Jonathan's friendship was the reason David was able to claim his kingship and do what he did. I've got to go on. Then, John Kabat-Zinn, who's a picture of him from him and me 3 weekends ago, he wrote this article called, What is My Job on the Planet, with a capital J. It's in his book, Wherever You Go, There You Are, Mindfulness, Meditation, and Everyday Life. A great book. I commend it to you. He said, we have to really, when we're mindful, be aware that there are certain things that simply won't happen unless I take responsibility for it. I'm just pausing to let that sink in. I mean, how many times do we let things pass and we don't take responsibility for them? And they're needed by the world. So he says, what is my job on the planet with a capital J, or what do I care about so much that I would pay to do it? Don't tell the vestry. I would doggone pay to do this work I'm doing right now at St. Luke's. That's how much it's giving me life. And we keep asking these questions when we are in our 20s. If we do that when we're in our 20s, by the time we're 35 or 40 or 50 or 60, the inquiry itself will have led us to places that we would not have gone had we merely lived a mainstream conventional life. He says, once the universe and the human family is your employer, very interesting things start to happen, even if someone else is cutting your paycheck. Now, we can't talk about vocation without also talking about contemplation. Now, in 1980, over at Spelman, this guy who was the spiritual director for Dr. Martin Luther King, named Dr. Howard Thurman, who went over to India and actually met Gandhi, he taught in all sorts of places, particularly Boston College. He said this in a speech, the baccalaureate address, and I think it's so important. There is in you, I'm going to wind up, something that waits and listens for the sound of the genuine in yourself. Nobody like you has ever been born, and no one like you will ever be born again. You are the only one. And if you miss the sound of the genuine inside you, you will be a cripple all the rest of your life because you will never be able to get a scent on who you are. He also said, if you don't do this, you will be at the end of the strings that somebody else is pulling. I wonder if you can get still enough, not quiet enough, but deeper than quiet. Still enough to hear rumbling up from your unique and essential idiom, the sound of the genuine in you. I don't know if you can, but this is your assignment. So that's what he told those graduates. Now, all of this has been important because my North Star, Thomas Merton, my spiritual father, said we can be ourselves or not as we please. We are at liberty to be real or to be unreal, or to be our false self or our true self. And we're not going to read all this, but I love the last paragraph. Trees and animals have no problem being saints, he said in this chapter of, for me, his most important book, New Seeds of Contemplation. God makes trees and animals what they are without consulting them, and they're perfectly satisfied. With human beings, it's different. God leaves us free to be whatever we like, to be human or not human, or to try to be somebody else, or to enjoy being ourselves. We can be ourselves or not as we please. We are at liberty to be real or to be unreal. We may be true or false. The choice is ours. Now, this category of being a true self or false self was what happened to me when Richard went back in and finished the exam like a good person should. I was outside, and the snow was falling, and I had really been still. We had to be to answer the questions. We had to outline the exam before we could even write the first word, and we couldn't write the first word until the third hour of the 4 hours, and that was what we had to sign the honor pledge about. So I had gotten still, quiet and still, and I went outside, and I heard the voice of the genuine say to me, and oftentimes the voice of the genuine is inaudible, right? Ed, are you an attorney? True self or false self, because I've been reading this guy the last semester, more than I'd been reading my law books. And I said, no. And then the inaudible voice, the voice of the genuine said, if you are not an attorney, if your true self is not an attorney, do you need a law degree? And I said, no. And then the sound of the genuine said, if you don't need a law degree, do you need to finish this law exam? And I said, no. And I kept walking. And that was my salvation. Because our vocation is our salvation. Our salvation is not doing something that you think God wants, like not playing cards and not smoking and not drinking, all that kind of. No, it's about being your good self and false self. So finally, and then I'll tell you the point I came to make. Frederick Buechner defines vocation this way. Vocation, of course, means call. One discerns one's call by noting two things: what we really enjoy doing and what the world really needs. Just keep those categories. What you really enjoy, your deep joys, and what the world's deep needs are. One of his examples is a woman who is a doctor in a leper colony who hates her work. She's clearly doing what the world needs, but she's not enjoying it. This is not her call. So here's leper colony, Jesus-loving leper. Buechner's other example is of the man who writes deodorant commercials. He loves his work, but Buechner questions whether the world really needs deodorant commercials. My wife always says the world definitely needs good deodorant commercials. Uh-oh, what happened to this? Oh, good. Buechner then concludes, neither the soft berth nor the hair shirt will do. One's vocation is where one's deep joys and the world's deep needs meet. And of course that changes as our bodies change. It changes as our dementia changes. that changes our relationship change, that changes throughout our lives. But I'm here to say it never stops. One of the core beliefs of our prayer book is life is changed but not ended. And that's the essence of the resurrection. If we're resurrection people, we understand that nothing ever stops. And the great thing about world science now is that it's teaching us that we are energy. Brother Einstein, got on my Einstein socks today, Richard. Energy equals MC squared. Energy and mass are interrelated, and so there's nothing that is material that is not also a ball of energy, including us. So energy never stops, but it changes. You know, the molecules in my body, all of them, were not there 9 years ago. We switch out that quickly. They were in Jesus or Muhammad or Gandhi or those trees or, you know, the lizards or the leaves or the eaglets or the earthworms. And it's all energy that's going through creation. So it's changing all the time. So I think that I'm saying that chapter 1 is our childhood. That I like to tell the story about my vocation in childhood because when I was a child, my parents would drop me off at a lady's house. And one day I had imaginary playmates. And my imaginary playmates were people who would come to church, and I would arrange her furniture in her living room, and I would have church. I would preach long sermons. Thank you, Horace. I would lead the singing because I have some pipes. And I would give the invitation, I would pray, and then I would stop at the bottom of the porch, in her front porch, and have imaginary conversations with people who were leaving. Oh, how's your son's collarbone? I understand he broke it. And how's your daughter with her marriage? I understand she may be thinking about a divorce. All of this was imaginary. So I told the story, and I ran across this from a guy who's an ophthalmologist in L.A., and he wrote me, he says, I'm still smiling with a mental image of young Ed Bacon Jr. standing in an imaginary pulpit preaching to an imaginary congregation. I am also someone who had an active imagination as a young boy. Let's just say my closet was a waiting room where my stuffed animals were patiently awaiting to be seen by me, a doctor. My bedroom office was complete with a beanbag examination chair, a Fisher-Price stethoscope, Q-tips, popsicle sticks, and empty Tylenol belt. So I messaged him 2 nights ago. I said, may I please quote this, Reuben? He said, of course. So he's a very successful ophthalmologist, but a member of that church that I used to be in. I'm wondering if chapter 1, childhood, isn't the time for our imaginary life and our spiritual life to have mystical experiences. When I was here on staff, I read a book by Thomas Groom, and he had given some research in this book about how the spiritual experiences of adults are memories of spiritual experiences they had as children. Now, if you and I were on retreat or had a day, I would now obviously send you to the balcony or wherever you wanted to go with your journal to be quiet and just be still and quiet enough to remember times when you had something that could be called a mystical experience when you were a child. Now here's the wrap up, and we're done. When I was a child, I played alone in a pine grove in South Georgia in Odom, which is a little hamlet next to Jessel. And this was my first experience with the Sound of the Genuine. The Sound of the Genuine said, you are the most special, beloved creature I've ever made. And in the very same instant, that voice said, and so is everyone else. Now that's the secret to my ministry about being fiercely guarding of the equality of every human being. Male, female, black, white, gay, straight, whatever. That is a thing that I will say. Let me tell you something. I've known this for almost 70 years. I'm 71. This happened when I was 5. So I know that the genuine is about human rights and human equality. So I'm just wondering about how many chapters we have. One is about childhood, where we have imaginary mystical experiences. 2 is our schooling. Some of us take longer to get schooled than others. You notice I didn't say education, because schooling and education are not the same, right? So there's a whole bunch of schooling, but education is lifelong, right? Then career, and then retirement. And I thought, literally, in 2016, that there were 4 chapters to life. Now, because of the surprise of St. Luke's in my life, I'm wondering about the 5th chapter being the surprise chapter. So, my friends, I just simply came to say, I think there are at least 5 chapters. Don't know how many there are. But you all, and I are in our surprise chapter. And the key to vitality is to keep this vocational question open and keep a heart that practices stillness so that we can hear the voice of the genuine. Bam, thank you. I enjoyed being with you all. That's it. Thanks. Now, we have just a few minutes. I was told that I could keep the pulpit till 2. And I love to fill the pulpit. So, and you have the microphone, don't you, my friend, if you don't mind sharing it. Does anybody want to say anything? Now, my associate rector many years ago told me, Ed, people are going to respond either to, I agree, I disagree, or, I want to think about that one. So I'm open to agreement, disagreement, or while I take a swig of water. And if your heart's beating fast, that means you're the first person who's supposed to speak.
That would be me. I want to say that I agree with everything you said, but every time you tell that pine tree story, my heart beats fast and I get goosebumps.
Oh, thank you.
It is really wonderful.
Thank you.
And it is something for us to follow.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Resonance does happen in the room. Edna, are you standing up to talk?
No, I'm standing up to remind you I gave you some things.
Oh, yes, ma'am. Before I forget, so Edna wants you all to take some of these and give us ideas about future Act III luncheon topics. All right? Any other questions or comments? Or or challenges? Hi, Jean.
Hi there. Some years ago, Joan Perdon and a committee were trying to think of a name for a senior group. Some didn't like the word seniors, some didn't like the elders, the whatever. So we came up with Act III. And in relationship to your book, I think there is now another chapter to be called Encore. And so after we are through with being chapter 3 in our lives, we go to Encore. Thank you.
Thank you. Horace, thanks for being the microphone person. Anybody else? We can quit before 2 o'clock. Sounds like we need to. So, I turn this back over to Meg, right? Oh, to Horace. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. As I mentioned, we are very, very blessed to have his intellect, his wealth of stories, his humor. It's great to laugh. That is wonderful. So thank you, Ed, for blessing us this afternoon.
Thank you.
You are welcome. And I just want to say again, as associate priest for pastoral care, that this is always a blessing. Act 3 is a blessing, and it's always great to have this spread of not only St. Luke's folks, but your friends and those from other faith communities. Just a show of hands, how many are visiting with us today from other places? All right, great, thank you, welcome again. And I'm Horace Griffin, and I get to do this every quarter. And so I'm going to invite Meg up now to talk about future. Did you have any closing remarks? And then I would like to end with a blessing.
Just to let you all know that in August, on the 28th, will be our bingo. So put that on your calendar if you like to do that kind of thing. It's really fun, and the prizes are really great. We have a great time together. It's the fun stuff we do. And then on December 5th, Ed has agreed to do part 2, whatever that's going to be. We don't know what that's going to be. It'll be from Ed. But so December 5th, put that on your calendar. So that will be our next 2 meetings that we have with Act 3. And invite your friends. And we love to have a full room like this. It's just more energy, and it's more fun. So people are welcome. You just have to call the reservation line, make sure you make a reservation so we have enough food.
Thank you. And I love playing bingo. I love winning, too. I'm pretty competitive. I'm not a great loser. So anyway, come back and enjoy. We have fun. It's a great time. And these luncheons are always so well put together. So my thanks to this wonderful committee that put this together. Let's give them a round of applause again. I would like to end with a blessing. It is entitled A Blessing for Old Age, but it could apply to anyone. And we are a widespread, I always hear you're as young as you feel. And so, it's just, and some say it's just a number. So we start at 60, and I'm almost there. So looking forward to being officially in this group. Just want to say one thing before I do the blessing. Betsy Allen, who I was thinking of her earlier, she's normally here with her mom, Ann Pritchett. And just many of you know Ann has come through, she had a surgery about a month ago and has done well in recovery. And she is just 95 and just living well. And so she's an inspiration to all of us. So I would like to mention her. Her daughter has had a challenge, but is doing well, went through surgery. Some of you know that. And so I would just solicit your prayers, continued prayers for Betsy Allen in her healing and recovery. And I'll end with good news. Allison Evett, talked with her earlier. She said that she feels wonderful today and that this is the best she's felt since her round with surgery and chemotherapy. So a round of applause for that. And prayers of thanksgiving. This blessing I'm going to read is from John O'Donohue, his book, To Bless the Space Between Us. Let us stand as you're able. And here is the blessing. Let us pray. May the light of your soul mind you. May all your worry and anxiousness about your age be transfigured. May you be given wisdom for the eyes of your soul to see this as a time of gracious harvesting. May you have the passion to heal what has hurt you, and allow it to come closer and become one with you. May you have great dignity. Sense how free you are. Above all, may you be given the wonderful gift of meeting the eternal light that is within you. May you be blessed, and may you find a wonderful love in yourself for yourself. And now, let us go into the world to love and serve the Lord. Alleluia, alleluia. Thanks all. See you next time.